Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TrekCannon Midnight Edition, where we cover the more adult, darker, themes of Star Trek. Now, today, I wanted to cover something that I wanted to cover for quite some time in Star Trek canon, and that is the great episode from the original series entitled "For the World Is Hollow, and I Have Touched the Sky." Now, this episode is directed by Anthony Leader. Now, Anthony Leader, he's directed 1964, was it Children of the Damned, right? He's directed episodes ranging from Lost in Space all the way to the Twilight Zone. And look, if you was to ever look up Tony's filmography, this dude's filmography in TV series and stuff like that is truly eclectic and vast. So again, I hope everybody got the opportunity to take a look at the episode because we're going to be covering it and it's going to include spoilers. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the title of this episode because well, actually I'll talk about the recap. See, the recap of this episode just real quick, right? The Enterprise flying through space, man, and they encounter some rockets, some missiles flying at them, basically, some old prehistoric ancient technology. Of course, they dispatch those real quick, man, and trace them back to this asteroid that's under artificial power. Kind of find out this isn't an asteroid at all. It's basically a generation ship. Spock, Kirk, and Bones, who has this particular disease called xenopolycythemia. First of all, doctors and nurses know what they be doing. They just be putting names on this kind of stuff because they the only ones who could pronounce it. But anyway, Bones is suffering from that disease, right? And it's basically terminal. There is no cure in Starfleet or the Federation for this disease. So anyway, he decides to beam down with Kirk and Spock. Basically, when they arrive, they get captured by the High Priestess and her men. They're taken in front of the Oracle, which is this AI, and basically tortured a little bit and had these devices put into them. They meet up with this dude who basically tells them the title of the episode in a real cool way. That dude dies, and the mystery deepens. Come to find out, Kirk and Spock and them like, yo, we finna leave. Bones basically decides to marry Nateria and stay on the planet. He learns the truth about how to change the course and what's going on with the AI. He relays it to Kirk. They come back. They try to take over the AI. Bones and them try to convince Nateria that everything she believes is not what she believes. And they end up basically saving the day. This ship is called Yanata. This world ship is called Yanata. It is from the home world of the Fabrini. I get into all of this, and it is on a collision course, but I believe the planet was called Durin 5, but yeah, Durin 5. Now, the meaning of the episode, "For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky." Like I said, I have thought that this is one of the best, if not the best, title episodes of any of the Star Trek episodes from all of the series. Not only because of how beautiful the name is, but because of how closely it's related to the events and the plot of what's going on in the episode. Because if you think about it, "For the world is hollow and I have touched the sky," as said and interpreted by the old man in the episode who basically delivered that sentence, basically means everything that I know, my reality, my world is empty, is hollow, it has no truth or meaning into it. And touching the sky means that I have found the truth. I have just glimpsed, possibilities that I was never aware of or I was never allowed to know. In essence, I have become woke. Now, in this episode, the main characters, of course, are Kirk, Spock, Dr. McCoy. And on the Yanatan side, right, you have the High Priestess, you have the old man for the story, okay, and you have the Oracle of the People. Now, the Oracle of the People, first of all, let's talk about what an oracle is. An oracle basically is something or someone that's regarded as an infallible authority on basically on a topic. Okay, they can't be, it's infallible. They can't be questioned. All right. Now, then you have the High Priestess. Basically, the High Priestess is a religious position. In the story, the old man is a person of subservience or slave or a servant, if you will. Now, the thing about the Yanatans, the ship and the inhabitants of Yanata basically came to know themselves as this. 10,000 years ago, their sun went supernova, and their original planet or their original species was called the Fabrini or the Fabrini. Now, some would ask, why would the Federation or Starfleet get involved in this? Because isn't it a violation of the Prime Directive? Now, the loophole that's used in this episode of why they even beamed down to figure out what's going on with this is because Janata basically is navigational computer had went off course. I'm gonna get a little bit more into that later, and was on a collision course with this planet called Duran 5. Now, Duran 5 is a Federation planet, meaning that Starfleet had to get involved. Now, there's a big question that usually arises when you're dealing with generational ship episodes, especially when it comes to this particular one. And this particular one is, how did the Fabrini, during the course of this generational ship, the Yanata, or leaving the solar system and on this 10,000 year journey, how did they come to fall under the control of the Oracle of the people? Right? That's been the biggest question when it has come to this particular episode. Now, there's not much about the Fabrini in Star Trek canon, but there is a lot of beta canon that covers the Fabrini and even the Yanatans. And I think one of them that comes to mind is Ex Machina, that novel. But, and they was mentioned, I think, in the episode Gambit in Star Trek The Next Generation. But in canon, there's not much. So let's try to infer a little bit based off of, things that would normally happen to a civilization that would be on an arc ship. Now, some could say, well, it could have been disease or illness or something like that, some type of virus that knocked out a significant populace of the Yanatans or the Fabrini as they was on their trip, and maybe knowledge just wasn't passed down that way. But see, the thing is that we find out in the episode that the Fabrini and the Yanatans by extension have medical technology that far surpasses that of the Federation. So I didn't think that could be it. Another could be that an entity made them forget, but there's no evidence of that. And why? What I think is most likely is that a generation actually rebelled. Basically, got stir crazy and just took over the ship. Took out everything that had to do with all of the scientists, all of the people in charge, all of the high-ranking officers, because based on the writing and the books and in the actual Ex Machina novel, we know that when the Yanatans actually made it to their new home world, they set up a democratic society that was that kind of had this issue with AI and everything. Totally understand that. And they had this faction that broke off and was like, "Hey man, we gonna suicide bomb stuff like that." So man, so you could turn back on the Oracle and get AI going back again because we just love being subservient. Anyway, I don't want to ramble. Or it could be that rebelling had nothing to do with it. If you look at what's happening, for instance, today, it could be that a generation of the Yanatans that was in charge just totally decided, hey, you know what? We're just going to start banning technology and information and all that kind of stuff. We're going to start seceding all of our power to the AI because it controls everything. We don't need to study or nothing like that. Basically, we could just start forming a religion around that. And guess what? We're going to form a power structure around that. And now I'm going to start as the high priest, or the high priest is going to make these positions. That's what we're going to do. And basically, we're going to solidify our power. Basically, we're going to with the help of the Oracle, because I'm pretty sure this wasn't something that the Oracle was programmed to do, because the Oracle was just programmed to take care of the people, fly the ship. All right. So forming a religion, all that kind of stuff had to be inspired or programmed into it by a Yanatan. Okay. So the Yanatans was like, hey, listen, the Oracle is going to do all of the technical stuff and everything like that. We're going to, we're going to refer to the Oracle when it comes to all of that. And basically, we're going to make a religion. We're not going to have anybody, exposing themselves to the truth, or we're not going to have anybody studying, becoming scientists. None of that, because all of that can take away our power. I think Orville did an outstanding job when they had the episode, I think it was called Mad Idolatry, that went into this very specific thing. Now, I mentioned in my intro video that, that this episode is filled with so many allegories that it's just hard to count. So, let's count them. Control, religion, marriage, politics, fear, perception, morality, betrayal, choice, and even love. Yeah, it's all kind of allegory in this episode. Now let's talk about the various methods of control that were used in this episode and the impact it had. The biggest right off the bat is religion. And the hierarchy was pretty simple. The oracle of the people, which was the AI. Then you had the high priest or the high priestess. And in this episode, it was the high priestess. All right. You had the zealots or enforcers of what's going on. You had the believers or the everyday people. And you had the servants or slaves. And you can also say that a lot of those guys will probably fall into the category of non-believers, because the thing is this: if you notice, the more towards the top you get towards any system, the more truth is available to the very few at the top and running that system. The true meaning, the true purpose, the true everything of that system is only known to the very few at the top. And once you start filter, the more and more you filter down, it becomes more and more opinion, more and more belief, more and more faith, more and more just blind obedience. But you have those very few who break the mold. And in this episode, it was the old man. So let's talk about the old man real quick, because the old man basically is Service and Kirk and Spock after they met the Oracle, who used electric shock upon meeting them to basically say, hey, you know what? I'm the dominant person around here. I can inflict harm and pain and damage upon you. I basically have control of whether or not you live or die. Right? It needed to establish that. Now, understand, it's an AI system. Why would he need to feel that that's the first way to interact with people you don't know? Again, AI learns, AI copies, AI is programmed. All right. So it needed to establish this dominance of the system and how the system can impair or have consequences and repercussions levied upon the people in the system. It was a show of, it was a demonstration, a show of power. All right. And you notice that after that, it was, the oracle was basically like, yeah, go be free and merry with my devices in your head, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute. But basically, the old man is like, yo, new people that aren't really a part of this system, y'all don't know nothing about it. Maybe y'all can help me, but listen, I got to be real sly about this, because I really don't know if I could trust y'all. And most importantly, the system is listening. The world is hollow, and I have touched the sky, right? And the more he tries to go into this, the more and more pain he's receiving, till eventually he's killed by the implant in his head. I believe it's called the instrument of obedience. And everybody who's in Yanatin gets one. And they gave one to Kirk, Spock, and Bones. Now, this is the second time we end up meeting the high priestess, Yanara. And the thing is this: notice how she responds to the death of the old dude. Oh, well, he must have been trying to go against the system, saying something that he wasn't supposed to be saying. Oh, well, no pity for him, which was, kind of indicative of the system, or the people who are in the system or high in the system. They have little regard for people who try to go against the system, or they have very little pity for people who are not part of the system. And we know she just wasn't a butt, because she ends up falling in love and falling for Dr. McCoy. And when I say falling for McCoy, I'm talking about actually falling in love with him and wanting to marry this guy, so much so that she's willing to betray a lot. But we'll get into that. Now, the next position in the religious hierarchy, of course, is the high priestess, because you need somebody basically to interpret the word, to put the word out, somebody who's a good believer, a strong person to communicate, the wishes of the person that's in power. You need that kind, the face of it. You need you need that kind of individual, right? Now, the thing that person needs to enforce all of this, to enforce, the structure, to enforce the rules and regulations, are the zealots, okay? The zealots, or the enforcers. These people, or the police force, these people are the ones that go and make sure that the believers and the servants are, doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're falling in line. They're the ones supporting or giving the system its power. And now you have the believers, everybody who's the majority of the Yanadans, right? Who are like, yo, the system is fine with me. It works as it goes. As long as you do what you're supposed to do, why question the system? I mean, we just go about our day. I don't want to get in trouble with the enforcers. I read the things that I'm supposed to read and all of that. And speaking of reading, the Yanadans worship this book or use this book as of literature called the Book of the People. Now we'll get into the Book of the People soon, but of course, every system of control when it deals with religion has to have some type of literature or reference that the people can read, absorb, and it's all a form of, well, you know. Now, we could talk about the politics as being a form of control for the Yanarans, but like I said, that was mostly in beta canon in the novel Ex Machina, right? But there was a transition between Yanara and when they became subservient to the AI and became um, was it Fenrir? Well, okay, when they became Yanadans, right? Where there was a democratic society on the ship. And of course, the bare essence of democracy or politicians is the evaluation and handing out or doling out of resources. So, in essence, politics or or those in politics or politicians, as I say, basically use the flow and control of resources to control the masses. Now, another method of control was fear, and I talked about them briefly already. You have the people who only have weapons. Those are the enforcers, the zealots. They're the only ones who are allowed to have weapons. And I find it interesting because if you have an instrument of obedience implanted in all of the Yonadans, then what is the reason of having enforcers? What's the reason of having the zealots? And again, it's a form of saying, oh, okay, these zealots, I don't want to get in trouble with them. I want to make sure that I don't run across them. I don't even, even if we find a way to get around the instrument of obedience, you still have these people, even if we find a way to, get away from the cameras and, find a way to, you do anything, find any kind of way, you still got the police force to physically enforce the laws. Well, let's talk about that instrument of obedience because think about it. The instrument of obedience suppresses not only speech, right? There is no free speech on Yanada. It suppresses speech. And if you try to break any of these rules, you're met with increasing amounts of pain until death, all right? So there is no free speech. There is no free thought, okay? There is no free assembly. So there can be no truth spoken. There can be no truth written. So anything about the truth, as far as books or literature goes, is banned or destroyed or never had the chance to be written because the author was put through pain and eventually killed before he could do it. By extension, then, there is no education, or the only education is designed and around to support and reinforce the religion. And of course, there's no mountain climbing. Now, if you think about the allegory of betrayal in this episode, we kind of find out that Bones betrays Natira because, Bones like, yo, I'm gonna marry you and everything because I'm dying. I'm gonna marry you. I'm gonna stay on this planet. I'm gonna finish out the, my last few remaining years and everything like that. And then when come find out when Natira got a cure, he like, oh, okay, well, I got the cure. I'll holler at you later. But, it's kind of theorized that between the events of this episode and I believe it was the motion picture that the Yanadans found a place and Bones was kind of going back and forth. But she was never mentioned again in canon. Hell, Natira betrays her faith because she's in so much love. She's so much in love with Bones, right? That when Kirk and Spock basically betrayed the Yanadans by trying to save their lives and get caught, she sentenced them to execution. And Bones basically like, yo, listen, I'll go ahead and agree to marry you, man, and stay on this world. I know you love me and everything. Could you please show him mercy? All right. And for Bones, she spared him, let him go, and everything. I asked the Oracle, begged the Oracle, hey, listen, can this dude be my mate? Can this dude be my husband? I know he's an outsider and everything, but I truly love him. And she not only betrayed her faith in the oracle, in the people, and good that she did, but the fact remains that she did, right? She did it for Bones. Hell, we could go so far as to say even that the oracle of the people betrayed the people. But again, the oracle is an artificial intelligence, meaning that it is either programmed that way or learned from example that way. And of course, I can't mention the fact that Kirk betrays the Prime Directive. But TrekCannon, you said earlier he was trying to save the Federation world. Yeah, and there was many ways he could have went about that. He didn't have to interfere with their planet. Okay, they could have remote interface with the Oracle once they found out the information. If they couldn't, they could have beamed into the facility, under cloak and dagger stuff like they've always done, and changed the direction that way. Hell, they could have edged it, off. They could have edged it back on course, some kind of way with a tractor beam. They could have done quite a few things other than interfere with the Anodins. Then let's talk about the mortality, aspect, allegory of it. When people are faced with death, when they know their mortality, they don't have a certain amount of time, right? They tend to have a bucket list. They tend to do a lot of things that they normally wouldn't have done, right? Had they had not known this information before. And then, so the question remains, did Bones truly love Natira, or did he love serving aboard the USS Enterprise? Because once he found out his mortality, right, Bones decided, hey, you know what? I'm done. I'm chilling. I'm getting out of Starfleet, man. I'm finna go be a United, man. I'm finna go marry Natira, man. Y'all be cool. Ain't nothing else I could do for you guys, right? But once he found out that his mortality was no longer an issue, that he still had many, many decades ahead of him, right? Did he be like, Natira, come with me? Of course she really couldn't. She was the ruler of the planet. But, he was just like, hey, I got my mortality back. I mean, I could go back to my career doing what I need to, being chief medical officer. Oh, this death thing, I'm gonna put that behind me. And then let's talk about the many allegories that they focused on as far as choice goes, right? And one of the main ones was giving up your autonomy as a society to artificial intelligence. And there's been so many examples in Star Trek, even in Star Trek, the original series, what was it, I, Mud, where these androids' plan to take over the universe, to take over humanity, basically was so simple. We will serve them. All right. Think about how simple of a plan it was. And I believe I talked about this before. In serving humanity, humanity will give them more to do so that they can serve them more. In effect, they will give up all of their ability of doing things, all of the barriers and hardships and everything that they would normally encounter, all of the, diversity that they would normally encounter that would normally make them better humans. They have given away to the AI. These people are now doing it, to so much so that we become just like, oh, okay, well, I don't know how to fix anything anymore. I don't know how to cook anymore. I don't know how to farm or garden anymore. I don't know how to do those things anymore, right? And I believe it was a Stargate episode, what was it, Stargate SG-1 episode, what was it, 2021, 2001, something like that, where they ran across this species that was super long-lived. And basically they were so technologically advanced that the humans basically was like, hey, well, we got our medicine. We don't need to worry about travel. We don't need to worry about, nothing, man. We got all these long lifespan and everything. Yeah. Come to find out that these aliens, in giving them this medication, neutered or sterilized all of humanity, and that only for a generation or two was the last to live. So humanity was dying out. And they didn't come in with shots or nothing like that. They just came in with long lives and the ability to make humans rely upon them, give up their autonomy. And this is something that that happened by a choice in the episode. The ethics of exposing the society to the truth that Kirk did. And one could argue that, well, the old man would have exposed the truth in the first place, or somebody like him, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Right now, we're dealing with the ethics and morality of Kirk doing it, and that being against the Prime Directive. The choice of deciding to not only go against the system and learn the truth, right? But once you have learned the truth, having the fearlessness to, expose the truth, to tell the truth, to speak the truth, no matter how much pain it causes you or the potential or eventuality of death, the truth needs to be spread. The choice of love between duty and love, your duty to the oracle, the duty to your faith, the duty to the people, right? Or to love, to McCoy, or to, like I was saying, love and faith. These are choices that are super heavy. And my favorite, the allegory of marriage, and this one right here, I left for last because, I wanted to leave it on a little lighter note because okay, first of all, marriage historically is a form of bringing cultures together. And in this case, Bones would have been losing his identity as a Starfleet officer and basically as a human to become subservient to the oracle of the people, the husband of the high priestess, right? And he wasn't going to become the high priest because he's married to the high priestess. No, maybe he's just going to become high priestess's husband, right? Giving up all of his identity and who he is, even so much as getting the instrument of obedience as a prerequisite of being married. Now, a lot of married couples can say that yeah, they think that they received that during some portion of their wedding ceremony in the first place. But in closing, man, this episode, like I said, was great. When you read into the episode, when you go into, in depth into the episode, why people was doing what they was doing, and the allegories and the situations, and all of that. This episode has so much meaning, so much more to it than just simply what the episode presents. Because here's the thing. There's one question that was something that always confused me every time I watched this episode. And that's this. Why did the Oracle allow the old man to climb the mountain in the first place? Like, that has always bothered me. And here's another thing. Whenever you guys think that your world isn't as it should be, just remember, it could be that your world is hollow and you need to touch the sky. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And as always, peace, recycle, and say the whales. You guys be cool.